Would all the aldermen please take their seats so we can get started? Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 2018-2019 Board of Aldermen Budget Deliberations. Today is May 2nd, 2018, and today we are here for the departmental presentation portion of the aldermanic process. Before we begin, will everyone please join me as we salute our flag? Madam Secretary, will you please take the roll?
Alderman Anderson.
Present.
Alderman Beatty. Present. Alderman Fortunati. Here. Alderman Gaynor. Here. Alderman Gurman. Here. Alderman Giannatasio. Here. Alderman Golden.
Alderman Golden would like to be excused, Madam Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alderman Grant.
Here.
Alderman Hardiman.
Alderman Hardiman would also like to be excused, Madam Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alderman Smith. Alderman Sutton.
Here.
Alderman Tranquilli. Here. Alderman Beccarelli.
Alderman Beccarelli is coming in late. He'd like to be excused for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alderman Detro.
Here.
Alderman Vitale.
We have 12 present. We do have a quorum. At this point, the first department organization on our agenda will be the Milford Progress Incorporated, page 91, account number 4819. We don't have a representative from Milford Progress, Inc., so would the mayor be so kind to answer any questions we have?
Mr. Chairman, through you to the board, Mr. Nuff did send us a report of some of the projects that are being proposed for Milford Progress. I'm happy to answer any questions. If you do need a face-to-face report, he did say that he would be available for the meeting that we have scheduled for the Board of Ed, but some of the projects that he listed in his report include planters for the downtown, some sponsorships. For example, they sponsor the downtown farmers market, and there's several other projects that they're working on right now, but those are two of the highlights that he listed in his report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Does anyone have any questions? Alderman Fortunati.
Thank you, through you. Mr. Mayor, I am not familiar with Milford Progress. So can you just tell me a little bit what it does?
It has actually changed within the last several years. Milford Progress used to be the official development organization for the city of Milford. That designation allowed it to apply for certain grants on behalf of the city. When it was originally founded, however, it was geared specifically towards the downtown area. It has since given up its designation The City of Milford's Ordinance Committee and the Board of Aldermen actually changed the ordinance so that now it is a economic development arm of the city. It is a private, nonprofit 501c3. It has no overhead costs. It's a group of folks that are elected onto a board with a set of bylaws that do good works around the downtown. Things like the lamp posts around the downtown were paid for by that entity, and several other significant projects that you notice every day were from the MPI.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Are there any more questions pertaining to Milford Progress? Alderman Vitale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the mayor. Mr. Mayor, what do they have? I know they've accumulated funds in their account over the years. Do you know what that accumulation is at this point?
I don't. I can get you that information. I do know that some of the funding in their account is restricted for particular purposes. For example, I believe that they have some money that is earmarked specifically for Devon that stems from a grant that Devon gave them for the signage project, and they've already utilized some of that money for signage in Devon, and some of it they still have projects that they're working on.
Thank you. Just to follow up, Mr. Chair, you named some of the projects that are in the future. Could you tell us what they have done in the last year for the city?
They did engage in a wayfinding sign project that is still ongoing. They paid towards that. They've paid towards things like the Alan Plattis study that was part of the last plan of conservation and development. Those are some examples of things that they've done recently.
Yeah, it would be a good idea to know what they have accumulated, because it always seems they have a lot of money and they don't really spend it. So the last time we got into that, which was a few years ago, so I'd like to really know what has been done and what kind of monies they have accumulated. Thank you.
Any more questions pertaining to the Milford Progress, Inc.? Seeing none, we'll open up under account number 4219, Human Resources Department, page 41.
Good evening. My name is Tanya Barnes, and I'm the Human Resources Director with the city. I've been with the city for about 4.5 years. Overall, my budget is flat. I'll just talk a little bit about what we've been doing over the last year and the work that we're doing. In the human resources and recruitment side, we've been pretty busy recruiting for a couple of months. In the past year, we had a hiring freeze, but once that was lifted, we've been quite busy. We've been recruiting for administrative assistants in DPLU, in the health department. We've hired 2 new accounting specialists in the finance office, a sanitarian. We're just filling the public works office manager position, which is unfortunately leaving a vacancy in my office, and we will be conducting a recruitment for an HR generalist in the next a week or so. We have been busy with a financial payroll HRS system, Munis. I'm sure you all have heard of it, so we're now in the thick of it. The financial piece started last year. The HR phase has started about a month and a half ago, so we're deep into that and working with our consultant and the staff to get that project going, which has been a lot of work, but it's going to be very exciting as we see the end product. On the collective bargaining side, we've been working with the city attorney's office, and we finalized the contract with police. We came before this board back in December. We're still finalizing negotiations with fire dispatch and continuing negotiation with nurses. All the other contracts have been ratified. And we processed 12 grievances this past year, 7 mediations. We participated in 5 arbitration hearings. I participated in 2 unemployment hearings and 2 CHRO hearings. On the benefit side, over the last 6 months, I have been facilitating and coordinating a RFQ process for our health administration. We worked collaboratively with the representatives from all of the bargaining units throughout the city and the Board of Ed. And we had various meetings, interviews, and we're in the process of I'm actually putting together a press release for the mayor to put out in the next day or so with that final decision, and there was continued negotiations afterwards. On the wellness side, we've put programs throughout the year. Every month we try to put a program for our employees, and back in February we would recognize for a second year in a row for a wellness award, and we're the only municipality that's been recognized in this program. So that's a little bit about what we've been doing. Any questions?
Alderman Giannattasio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. Good evening.
Good evening.
You mentioned the human resource generalist.
Yes.
How long has that been vacant, that position?
It's going to be vacant as of Monday, next Monday.
Oh, okay. Now, this salary that you have posted here, is that the first step? Is that the salary that the new hire would be coming in at, or is that what the person that's there currently making?
That's the current salary. That's the current salary for the incumbent.
Okay, so I guess my question is, when you advertise this position, will it be at this salary or less?
We usually typically try to start everyone at the first step. Depends on the position. Sometimes if we are having a very difficult time recruiting, we may go to the Civil Service Commission and request to start at a step higher, up to 3. We don't go beyond that. But typically we try to start employees at step 1, at the minimum step.
Okay, just to follow up, Mr. Chairman, through you, this current salary that the incumbent is now making, what step is that at?
That's the max.
Oh, that is? Okay. And do you know what the first step salary is?
I don't know offhand, I apologize.
Okay, maybe if you can get us that
Sure.
information, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just make some follow-up comments to add to what Mrs. Barnes said. If there's an internal transfer, in many cases, the person transferring to another department can be eligible to get the maximum step. In this case, am I free to disclose? Okay. We have the human resource generalist currently at the max step in HR. This person is moving to take the public works vacant manager position. And as you may recall, when we looked at that budget, I lowered that to the minimum step, but this internal candidate is eligible for the maximum step. So I will be planning on submitting a technical correction before the budget vote to increase the Public Works Office salary accordingly, and lowering this, as Mrs. Barnes said, to probably step 3 to give her the leeway in the recruitment process. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, for that explanation. Is there any more questions? Alderman Vitale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Peter. Help me understand something. there's been no adjustment in that account because of salary. So if the generalist who's making $65.75 is going to Public Works, that means Public Works pays less than that salary? And if so, why would you want to make a change? That was hypothetical. But the point is, I would assume it's on a different step, a different level. So why would there not be an adjustment at that point?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Alderman Vitale, I'm trying to understand the question, but my understanding is that per civil service rules, the internal candidate, the current HR generalist, is eligible and needs to receive the maximum step in the Public Works manager position, office manager position. So that's per civil service rules. That person has to get, can't get a lesser salary, and per civil service rules, I'll just tell you the final result. She is eligible to get the maximum step in the new position.
Having said that, then what is the range in that new position? What is the maximum in that new position?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, in which department? I can look that up.
In the position that she's going to in Public Works, what's the max at that point?
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, through you to Alderman Vitale, if you look at your budget book on page 64, it lists that position. It lists it with the modified amount as well as the prior amount. So it's between $54,213 and $67,059 between the first step and the max step.
Okay, so I can see, so the max step that she's making is $65.75. I'm assuming it's 3 steps or 4 steps in all of the.
No, it varies in the bargaining unit. Some are 6 steps.
So how many steps are in this unit? In Public Works, how many steps are there?
Oh, in Public Works, that's a 6 step minimum, 4th and max.
Is 6 steps. So in Human Resources, how many steps is it?
I believe it's either 5 or 6.
So somewhere in between, there is no greater salary, but less than the top step with 6 steps?
No.
You justify and confirm that, Peter?
Let's focus on which salary are you looking at first?
Assuming they're both 6 steps, is that true? They're both 6 steps?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the HR generalist is 6 steps.
And the Public Works?
They're in 2 different bargaining units.
They may be in 2 different bargaining units, but the point is how many steps. They still have steps in their contract.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Alderman Vitale, the Public Works manager position is in the MSA union, not the Public Works union, actually the MSA union. And that position at grade 28, as we see in the budget book, is 6 steps.
So they're both 6 steps, but a higher rating or a higher salary at each of the steps, so that therefore there's no step less than 6 steps for this individual who still will incur a raise within the 6th step. It has to go to maximum.
Yes, that is my understanding, that it has to go to maximum because she is currently at maximum step now.
So that maximum step of 65.75 is greater than a 5th step in the Public Works.
The 65,423 in the current year at maximum step grade 28 for the Public Works Office Manager, yeah, that is the maximum step.
Okay, so therefore, she would be making less than.
I'm trying to understand what you mean why she would be making less than.
Less than any other step, but maximum. She would have to go to maximum step in order to get a raise and an increase in salary.
Mr. Chairman, again, we could share the specific civil service requirement at issue. We'd have to look it up, what the exact wording is.
That's not necessary, but the point is, in most cases, when you do get a different position, you shouldn't be paid less than what you're already making if you're going into another position, hopefully, and if it's a...
Through you, Mr. Chairman, if I may add, and Mrs. Barnes can correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding it is a promotion.
Yes.
Right, so
This is
therefore
not
you-
a lateral move, it's a notice of promotion that we had to approve through the civil
Right, so
service.
therefore, you shouldn't be making less than what you would be making ordinarily, so that sixth step, as far as you explained it, the sixth step in the human resource, in Public Works is a few dollars more than the sixth step in the human services, so therefore, she would have to go to the top step.
Correct.
Thank you.
And I do want to clarify, in negotiations for that Public Works Office Manager, the position used to be a 37.5-hour position. When it became vacant, we negotiated with the union to turn it into a 40-hour position, no increase in the salary. So the salary remained the same, the hours of work increased to 8 hours per day, because that position was supervising employees that were 8-hour position, and it didn't quite make sense that we had a supervisor that was there half an hour less than their employees. So when the position became vacant, we changed the hours for that position. We did not increase the rate at all.
Thank you.
Any more questions pertaining to Human Resources Department? Alderman Giannatasio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. Just a follow-up, Tanya. When you advertise for a new hire, you typically advertise at the first step salary?
We advertise the range, but we do say that typically we start at the minimum step.
Which is the minimum step, which is the first step?
Yes.
Okay, so at what point, at whose discretion, and I know that you're the head of your department, but I'm just talking other departments as well, at whose discretion is it to, let's say, hire somebody at a higher step based on their experience or based on, you know, whatever
It's usually up
the
to
market?
I'm sorry, apologize. It's usually up to that department head, but we do have to go to the Civil Service Commission and request permission and have justification for it in order for them to approve that.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, through you, good evening, Mrs. Barnes.
Good evening.
I just wanted to give a little perspective. In your 4.5 years, we have, as I recall, done a lot of work through the name change from personnel to human resources. We recategorized the positions in your office. You've done a lot to update the classifications prior to job descriptions being advertised. So that is a discrete area within your office that you've taken on and your staff has taken on. Aside from filling the vacancies that do exist now that the freeze is off, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I have to go back to a question that I asked you at some point in the past, and that is, what has that work informed you about pay equity? And are we in a position to undertake a study of pay equity to look at some of the lower paid positions and see how they match up with some of the surrounding towns and cities?
I have to say that overall, the lower level positions are on par with neighboring communities, and if you take as a whole, not only just our wages, but the overall benefit package that the city provides, I don't have a problem recruiting for lower level positions. I mean, we posted a couple of months ago a clerk A position, and I had over 115 applicants. Where I do have a difficulty recruiting for is actually high-level management, either division heads or department head positions. For instance, we've been posting for the wastewater superintendent. We've posted it for weeks, months on end, and we can't find qualified candidates. We did the same with the foreman for wastewater. We've actually done direct mailing. I asked DEP to send me a listing of everybody who has a Class 4 and a Class 3, and we send direct mailing to all of those candidates with the posting. We received one application so far. So overall, on the lower level and mid-level positions, we don't have a challenge recruiting for those positions. We get plenty of qualified candidates that we can test, that we can use various types of testing. Since I came on board, we have implemented computerized testing software and so forth. And we can derive a good pool of candidates. When we reach the higher level positions, that's where we're having more challenges.
So, follow-up. So, such a comparison to surrounding towns, that study does exist now?
I'm sorry?
You had mentioned that we're comparable to surrounding towns. Is that information available for us to take a look at?
I don't have a study per se, but I am a member of COMPELRA, which is the Connecticut Public Employers Labor Relations Association. And in meeting with my colleagues and working with CROG, we've been putting together a HR portal, and we share information, we share contracts, we share that type of information when we're recruiting. And overall, I am pretty certain that where we are in terms of wages for those low-level positions, we are in a good position, but we don't have a actual study per se. I'm just speaking from my professional experience and my discussions with the colleagues.
I appreciate that, but I'd like to be in a position to know with certainty just where we do stand. So if you can assist us in that regard, I would appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, through you to Alderman Anderson, CCM is part of the services for that organization. We get a data reporter. I believe that they can break that information down from contract to contract to a more granular level where they give us position salaries or position wages. So I think we can get that information through CCM, and we'll look into that.
I would appreciate having it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Alderman Gurman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Ms. Tanya. First of all, congratulations to you and the Wellness Committee for that award. That was pretty impressive for the last 2 years. I know the board works really hard. My question is on the health insurance, and maybe you can't share quite yet, if they've decided who and the savings, if there is savings with a new contract. Is it too soon to talk about that?
Yes, and I do realize that when Attorney Burcham was here as well, the conversation came up. As I said, I am working on a press release for the mayor to issue in the next day or so, but I can talk a little bit about the process. You know, we worked collaboratively with the unions from both City Board of Ed, and we also included our retiree population. That we had some members that wanted to be part of it, and we said, you know, this is an open process, please be part of it. So we had a review committee of about 25, 30 people in total. We worked with our consultant, Milliman, who issued the RFQ, received the data, reviewed it, helped us make a selection of finalists. We brought those finalists in, interviewed those finalists, were able to ask follow-up questions, then we continued some negotiations afterwards. But I can say that with the with the company that we're going to be going with, the city is going to be realizing major savings. There's going to be improved services, added personnel to provide services for the city, and overall, as the committee came together to make the recommendation to the mayor and to the city to go with the selected candidate, everybody, when we left that room, and talked about it, have been very pleased with the process and the final outcome.
We'll have an answer next couple days on who that
Yes.
is. All right. Thank you.
Welcome.
Alderman Fortunati.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. Regarding the difficulty in attracting upper-level management spots, do you have an opinion as to whether it's due to a lack of candidates, qualified candidates, or that the position, salary, benefits isn't competitive?
I would say in the wastewater division is a combination of both. One is that the state in general does not have enough licensed Class 4 people to fill all the positions that the state has with all the wastewater treatment plants. The testing for it is very challenging, and we've had internal candidates that have, or internal employees rather, that have a Class 3 and have taken the test numerous times for the Class 4 and just can't seem to get over that threshold to meet that. And then when we post, I think that a little bit is in the wage scale, because we just, last time we did a recruitment, we had only 3 candidates. We selected somebody in December, they came on board, and after 4 weeks went back to their town because they were counter-offered by that town. So so I think it's a combination of both in that particular area.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Alderman Beatty.
Thank you, Phil. Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Ms. Barnes, thank you. I have a question back to the pay equity study. One driver that you look at right away when you can't fill an upper management position is the salary. And you said the benefits are good, and you think that there is parity. So that's one driver, and it's obvious, it's always discussed. On the lower end of the scale, I have to come back to the equity study. It doesn't always hold water when you're doing an equity study, that because the positions are filled quickly, that it means that they're fair. And that's because if you mentioned anecdotal information, I'll give you anecdotal. I was just in the card store on the Post Road, met somebody I knew. I said, "Oh, you're here?" She said, "Yes." She was a bookkeeper, what was used to be known as a bookkeeper for a business, and then took some time off and came back, and she said, "I can't get a full-time job at any other salary but this. I'm making what I made 20 years ago in my other job, but I want to work full-time." So the fact that they're filled quickly at the lower end of the scale, that as an indicator means different things for the lower end than the high end often. And just, that's my 2 cents about the pay equity study, because my notes from last year when you gave your presentation that we all appreciate and admire and is thorough. At the end of that, we talked about doing an equity study for the lower end, and it was also about gender. That's another driver for a pay equity study that doesn't show on surface by positions being filled. That's just, and I'd like to see that too in a more formal way. And I don't know whether that's to you or to the administration. And it's not a criticism, it's a question where I think we'd all benefit from.
I understand.
Thank you, Alderman Beatty. Any more questions? Alderman Vitale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Ms. Barnes, when you negotiate within the union structure itself, you have somebody on the other side of the table, obviously. You have a union. Who negotiates for those upper management positions? Do they just sit with you and you are the negotiator with them on an individual basis? And I have a follow-up.
No, the supervisors have a union.
Okay, having said that, with pay equity and gender equity and everything else, and being familiar with negotiations on the other side of the street, the fact remains that when the unions negotiate, they've already done their job by getting historical data as far as what's happening around the other towns and other cities, so they come in with the ability for the city to pay, number one. Number two, it might be, hey, Stratford, we know what Stratford's doing, what Trumbull's doing, within a radius of whatever. So the negotiations take up from that point on. So they're not coming in blindly in knowing that they haven't got a better pay scale or equity as far as pay is concerned, because obviously when you go through the whole process, you discover many things as far as what, and it's usually what, through mediation or whatever it might go through, or arbitration, it's the ability for the city to pay. So when they come in and have all their data, you have to negotiate among that data that they already have. So therefore, do you feel that these people are underpaid in positions of, other than that difficult position to fill at upper management, like wastewater or somebody that needs high credentials? But are you having a problem filling these other positions because of pay equity? Pay scale?
Which position specifically?
Any other position that a union is negotiating with you?
The supervisors or just a clerical position?
In general. Well, any union that comes and negotiates with you, right? They sit with you or whomever, and they bring all the data in as far as what is going on around town and historical data, and whether their pay scale, whether the pay scale needs to be adjusted, whether the minimum or starting scale salary needs to be adjusted, and they come out with hopefully agreeable positions. So how do we figure that in some instances I guess I'm saying that we don't really need a pay equity kind of survey, because it's already being done through negotiations with the unions, is it not?
Correct. I mean, I do understand your point, yes, that the unions are representing their members and they're bringing forth their demands, and they're considering all those factors prior to coming to the table.
So if they don't come in with outrageous requests, the fact is that negotiations are settled, and people supposedly are happy with what has happened in negotiations.
Correct.
So as I said, to Alderman Anderson's point that we need a pay equity survey, and with CCM, getting all the data from CCM with area towns, but a well-informed union coming into negotiations has all that data already, and they're going to come in strong with data so that they can support their demands or their asks. So I don't see anything with a pay equity survey. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, not to belabor the point, the data reporter that CCM provides is used as a tool for these negotiations. So I was just going to pass along to you folks what city administrations receive from CCM. One of the other things that we will have coming online relatively soon is a new HR portal that will give us additional information during the hiring process. It's a new tool that came about from a state grant that all municipalities will have access to, but Milford was one of the pilot towns in this program, so we had the ability to receive this ahead of time, correct?
Mm-hmm. And the initial portal has mostly management positions, but in the next phases, they will be adding hourly positions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that clarification. Is there any more questions pertaining to human resources? Seeing none, thank you very much, Tanya.
Thank you.
For answering all our questions, and your presentation was great. Thank you for the work you do for the city of Milford.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I have the civil service and the pension board next.
The next department we were going to hear from is department number 4145, Pension and Retirement Board, page 30. Is there any questions pertaining to Pension and Retirement Board? I see none.
Okay. Civil Service.
Civil Service, Department number 4151, the Civil Service Commission, page 31. You have any questions pertaining to Civil Service Commission? I see none.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. You too, Tanya. Thank you very much again. The next department we're going to hear from is Department number 4813, Bridges Healthcare Incorporated, page 89.
Good evening.
I wanted to, do you have the thing? Yeah.
I wanted to start by giving you Good evening again, Alder women and men. I'd like to introduce Jennifer Fiorello, who is our Bridges Chief of Strategy and Business Operations. Since we were here last May, Bridges has served 921 children and families and 1,104 adults from Milford in a variety of our programs, including outpatient, home-based, and community-based. As always, expanding and sustaining our current services, as well as adding new services, has been a major focus. This year, Bridges was awarded a statewide grant to provide outreach and engagement services to the elderly, the goal being to identify individuals 62 and older who have a mental health or addiction disorder that is not being treated. Another highlight of this year has been our emphasis on the opioid epidemic in the communities we serve, including Milford, which has involved both education and awareness strategies and new and effective treatment modalities. Finally, in April of this year, Bridges became certified by the Joint Commission for the Accreditation of Healthcare Organizations, or JACO, as some of you may know it, which is recognized nationwide as a symbol of quality that reflects an organization's commitment to meeting certain performance standards. So now I'll turn to Jennifer, who can talk a bit about Bridges' fiscal strengths and challenges that we face.
Good evening. So last year, Bridges had a better fiscal year than what we're seeing this year. This year so far, we're running on a pretty much a balanced budget, a little bit of a surplus. The unfortunate reality for us is that we've lost 5% of our total contract from the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. So while this year was a prorated cut, it would annualize as $353,000. For this year, it was a little less than that by about $41,000. But what that ultimately meant for us was that we lost funding out of our outpatient, our adult outpatient, our case management programs, and our young adult service programs primarily. The good news is that we didn't have to cut clinical services this year with the outpatient cuts because we focused on an administrative position that we ended up having, unfortunately, to cut. But we are uncertain about what next fiscal year will bring to the table and how we will handle future cuts should they end up somehow impacting clinical services. This year, we're also experiencing a short in our program service fees, which is what we generate out of our third-party reimbursement. We over forecasted, and we, at this point, are running at $113,000 less than we had projected. And that is, at this point, we're seeing that our outpatient program and our child outpatient program are running at about $120,000 deficit cumulatively. So while we've been good about keeping our expenses down, and that's what we focus on, eventually our outpatient services could be impacted, especially if we see that we'll have more cuts in our DEMIS funding. The City of Milford funding clearly is a big help to us because we rely heavily on that, and many of the folks that we service out of our outpatient programs come from Milford.
Any questions?
Anyone have any questions? Alderman Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Refresh my memory, was there some discussion in your presentation last year about what is it, a teen outreach program?
Yes.
That was on Boston Post Road. Could you provide some information about that,
sure.
please? Thank you.
Actually, it's our, it's called Room 4, and it's on the Boston Post Road in Milford, and we received funding for that initiative 2 years ago from the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services to provide, specialized services in the community, not clinical services, to youth and young adults who don't typically show up in a traditional mental health setting, but may have substance abuse or addiction problems. And so we're happy to say that this has been everything that we hoped for in terms of our goal and what we presented in our proposal to DEMIS to fund this, and that is we have young adults, age 16, 17 through 22, 23, just walking into this setting because of programs that we offer that are, not related to, you need help, you need to get services, but are just kind of offered to the young population. And we have been able to make a significant impact in terms of mental health and addiction, just by having those young folks in this facility, whether it's using our computer room or playing pool or talking to staff or taking advantage of some of the other programs that we offer, like, for instance, how to write a resume. We have a yoga class going on there. We have, lots of really, healthy alternatives that we feel, young adults, youth and young adults are interested in. And through those venues, we're able to identify the people that really need to be referred to mental health and addiction treatment. And I could provide you, I think last year I provided you with numbers. The numbers are growing. The amount of people that we've reached in that program keep growing. So we're very happy about that. And we actually hope, I hope every day that, the department is going to keep funding it because it's a really great program.
Thank you, Barbara.
Okay.
And I take it that it's by referral and self-referral as well.
Actually, because of the outreach and the marketing that we're doing through social media, most of it, which is very different from a lot of our other programs, is self-referred. So, just young folks just walking in, hearing about it.
Great. Thanks so much,
Okay.
Barbara. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Alderman Vitale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Good evening, ladies. Barbara, congratulations and good luck in your retirement. Jen, can you had indicated that, I don't think you gave us a number for how many residents you serve in Milford? Is there a number that you have?
Yeah, I gave that.
I didn't hear it, I'm sorry.
921 children and families.
921 children and families,
Thank you, I didn't hear that, I'm sorry, you missed that.
1,104 adults.
Thank you.
Alderman Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. And thank you for all the help that you're doing for the families in Milford, and especially the youth. I mean, that's an excellent program that got underway. You mentioned that you're having some financial difficulties, especially this term. What type of outpatient services might end up getting cut or be affected if you're not able to get the funding that you need?
So the most costly services that we provide are our outpatient services. We have an adult outpatient clinic and a child outpatient clinic, otherwise known as a child guidance clinic. And the situation there is that while we get help from, on the adult side, from DMIS, the Department of Mental Health and Addiction, which serves adults, and DCF, which funds a lot of our children and family programs, the outpatient services are, because they're provided by licensed professionals, many of whom are with Bridges for a long period of time and are expert in their field and have been providing the services for a long time and have been highly trained. What we have found over the years, and there's actually been a study in Connecticut by our trade organization. It used to be Connecticut Community Providers Organization. It's now known as the Alliance. That did a study about 5 years ago. And so the unit cost of providing the services on an outpatient basis to children and families and adults is lower than what it actually costs the provider agencies to deliver the services. So the providers are more expensive than what we can get reimbursed for. And so that's why the outpatient programs, we're always struggling with these programs because we lose money, because what we pay the providers doesn't really meet the, the cost of delivering them.
Is there any more questions for our presenters? Alderman Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, ladies. At budget time, we always see that the granted agencies come before us, and I'm reminded sometimes to put in perspective what our contribution is to your operations. I just have two quick questions. According to the brochure you handed us from the 2016-2017 financial statement, local support is $656,000, of which our grant is $375,000. I assume the others are similar grants from the other municipalities, not necessarily charitable organizations. Can you tell me what the other portion of that is, where it derives?
Okay, so do you want to? Sure. I'm not sure what you're looking at, but
So the local support that's referenced in that on those financials is comprised of the City of Milford, also local support through United Way. Yes, United Way, we get $135,000 this year for our outpatient clinic, and another $40,000 for our young parent program. We also receive funding from the town of Orange, about $100,000. And the city of West Haven is a lot less. It's about $10,000.
Thank you. And one last thing. You mentioned, as I said, Bridges is kind of at the forefront of this, and certainly we are aware of constantly in the media discussions about the opioid epidemic, which would fall if any agencies or providers in our community, Bridges is probably at the forefront of that. as far as state and federal grants, are they keeping up with their end on that, especially considering the publicity that surrounds this scourge that this and many other communities in our country are facing?
Certainly, Bridges has received some state funding. Actually, it was the latter end of last year from the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services to provide an outreach and education program, which we took advantage of. There is federal funding coming down that we've seen. We've been applying, and we're actually in the process of working on applying for a federal grant right now. They're very competitive, so when the RFPs come out, you know, they're offering countrywide only. I'm just, you know, giving an example. The latest one is they're only offering 21 awards across the U.S., so they're very competitive. They usually get, you know, upwards of, you know, 400 or 500 submissions. So, so while Bridges has always been competing for those dollars, it's not always a guarantee that we're going to be getting that funding.
Thank you very much. If I could, Mr. Chairman, also just like to acknowledge we have two members of the Board of Directors here on our board, Alderman Vitale and Alderman Beatty, and I wanted to acknowledge and recognize their service on the board of Bridges Healthcare. Thank you for that.
Well, and also Karen Fortunati is on our Board of Directors as well.
She didn't make the brochure this year.
Oh,
so
okay, okay.
Thank you, Karen.
Oh, Alderman Beatty, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Jennifer and Barbara, and thank you for that, Phil, Frank. Appreciate that. The work of Bridges is just marvelous, and 900 families and children served just in last year, plus the, what was it, 1,100 adults, did you say? Yeah. So thank you, and to West Haven and Orange. Now, I know from the board, as Alderman Vitale does, more intimate detail with the work you do, and we've discussed as the state refers more of what was once funded by the state to the nonprofits, and that seemed like a very good thing. So in the last 2 years, the nonprofits have been able to pick up the slack, get some of that funding and grants as you describe, and you've been both innovative and creative and determined and have gotten some. But when we've also discussed on the board that the balance of when it comes, you're not getting new positions and you're getting more responsibilities. So you said tonight, am I correct? And if so, I'd like you to share it a little bit, that perspective with the rest of the Board of Alders, that Demas may cut for this upcoming year funds for, say, substance abuse, opioid addiction, and yet at the same time you have a grant for a new population, which are elders who are experienced, have experience, but now they've aged out with opioid addiction. So where does that, when does that come that we should all be concerned and that some of that reorganization and referral to nonprofits is not helpful? Maybe you could, we discussed this on the board, I don't want to make it too detailed, but tell us a little bit about that. Do you understand my concern?
I'm not sure I fully understand, so maybe you can.
Yeah, I think, so when we have the opportunity to apply for a grant that we are awarded, it doesn't, so it covers a specific area and a specific need. It's usually in population, it's time limit, usually it's time limited, sometimes it's a pilot program. Those dollars usually dry up. A lot of them come from sometimes federal pilot programs that go through the state. So the state administers the funds, and they're time limited, so they're gone within 3 to 5 years. The other problem is that you have staff that you've hired in the outpatient, let's say for the outpatient program, that may not be, well, let's just say in reverse, that you have folks that you've hired for, say, an outreach program who may not be eligible for positions in, let's say, the outpatient program because we need licensed professionals. So there's an implication when those dollars dry up. So it's not necessarily secure funding.
And so the other
But
thing
you
I
keep the responsibility. You've developed that responsibility
Right.
and that, so you feel responsible for
Right.
elders with
We absorb
opioid,
it.
even if the money dries up.
Right.
Okay.
And so I think the other
That's what I
thing
wanted.
that's a theme with both federal funding and state funding, and which we've experienced for decades, is that any funding we get, as Jen said, is usually a time limited. Sometimes it's 1 year, sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 5. And what we need to prove in our application, and then they hold us to this, is how we're going to sustain the program, the initiative, without the funding. And so I think that's where a lot of nonprofits you know, sort of get into a little bit of trouble, because this is what we do. You know, this is what we're in business for. We're here to serve you know, vulnerable populations that need services, and we happen to be experts in providing them. But and so we go for all of these grants, and most of the time we're fairly successful. But our challenge is sustaining them after the funding period is over.
So back to the question about the young adult drop-in center. And I know that has a part-time staffer, and you've done very well with that. But what happens? You feel a responsibility that's part of your mission now.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think what we do, what we've become good at, but we're not always successful because the competition is very heavy, is then when that funding is threatened from the state or the federal government, and we want to keep the program going especially because we see that it's working, is we turn to private foundations and fundraising to, you know, to meet those needs. And that's difficult.
Thank you, Bob.
Any more questions pertaining to Bridges Healthcare? Alderman Fortunati.
Thank you, through you. Good evening. Regarding Room 4, the Young Adult Drop-In Center, which is a tremendous resource, a safe place for kids and young adults to go to, socialize, but also get mental health care if they need it. Do you have an idea as to how many Milford young adults use it? Is it primarily Milford?
Yes, and I can get you, I'm sorry, I don't have those numbers, but we do. We have the numbers broken down by town served. We have, you know, primarily Milford and West Haven, but we have some Bridgeport folks and Stratford. But we definitely do have the numbers of Milford, and that's, like most of our programs, it's the majority.
Okay, great. And one more question regarding Alderman Smith's question about the opioid addiction and your efforts. Did you just start a new program, an addiction program for young adults and families at Room 4?
We started what we just started was we received a small grant about 4 or 5 months ago to provide an evidence-based group model called CROSS for young adults that were you know, having an addiction problem or were bordering or were using, and then their friends and families. So we did receive that funding, and we decided, I mean, we were able to offer it in any setting that we wanted, but we chose Room 4 because we were getting so many you know, youth and young adults, you know, going to that site, and we thought that would be the best way to deliver the model.
That's great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Chairman, Alderman Vitale had already wished Barbara a happy retirement, but this will be Barbara's last Board of Aldermen budget hearing, and I know that I speak for this entire board in thanking her for her commitment to Milford and her service to our community, and I know I join with everyone here when I say we'll miss you. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, Mayor Blake. Thank you. Thank you.
The next department we'll hear from is Department number 4807, Regional Mental Health Board, page 88. I don't see anybody here from the Mental Health Board.
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions. Again, as you will recall, Claire Phelan used to be the representative of Milford. We do have a new representative. There is a pro rata expense that hasn't changed, at least since I've been involved with local city government. I think this is my 15th budget, and it has been the same amount for that 15-year period.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is there anybody have any questions regarding the Regional Mental Health Board? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll move on to the next account. It's account number 4801, Council on Aging.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Janice Jackson, Executive Director of the Milford Senior Center. With me tonight is Phyllis Leggett, a bookkeeper. You will be receiving a copy of our May Bulletin and a copy of our programs and services. I would like to give you some general information about the Senior Center based on last fiscal year ending June 30th, 2017. We have 42 employees, 5 are full-time and 37 are part-time. Last year, our Meals on Wheels drivers delivered 10,992 meals to elderly and disabled clients in Milford. We have a total of 12 vehicles and 9 drivers. 2 drivers are full-time and 7 are part-time. Our transportation service provided 22,674 rides for older adults. Last year, we served 30,134 meals in our mini lunch program. Our continental breakfast program served 7,384 seniors. Our insurance specialists served 2,339 clients. Our social services served 6,909 clients with requests such as home care assistance, housing referrals, entitlement programs, and referrals to health care and assisted living facilities. The Milford Food Bank assisted 2,856 clients with food. 356 people over the age of 55 joined the Senior Center. 20,593 members attended our classes. 4,134 people attended special events at the center. 1,756 seniors attended our trips. Thank you very much for all your support. Does anyone have any questions about any of our programs or services?
Anybody have any questions regarding Council on Aging? Alderman Gurman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you to Janice. What is the membership to the Senior Center now?
Approximately 3,000.
No, the annual membership cost.
Oh, I'm sorry. The membership dues is $15 a year, and our board of directors approved 50 people that do not live in Milford, from other towns, non-residents, and they pay $25 a year.
Thank you.
We have a long waiting list for that, by the way.
Anyone else have any questions pertaining to Council on Aging? Alderman Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, not a question but a comment. I just want to say that I note that the Writers Unlimited group will be having their program on the Friday, May 18th. I have been in years past to that event and enjoyed it greatly. It is a vibrant group, very creative, and they never disappoint. And thank you very much for what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Sutton. Does anybody else have any questions for Council on Aging? Seeing none, thank you, Janice and Phyllis. Thank you for all the great work you do for the citizens of Milford.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. The next department facing us this evening is the account number 4320, the Fire Department, page 51.
Good evening, Chief Doug Ito. I have tonight with me Assistant Chief Gary Baker, Chief of Operations, and Battalion Chief Dan Wasmer. He's the Chief Financial Chief and also the EMS Chief. You have any questions?
Anyone have any questions for the First Department, 4320 for the Fire Department? I don't think so. The next department would be department number 4360, Lights, Hydrants, and Water, page 62. Alderman Gurman on the first department.
Back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to one of the chiefs. What do we have for major expenses coming up this year? Any major purchases or major things, buildings, or?
For on the capital side, which we're putting together now, we have mostly the asphalt, the paving of our parking lots and our ramps. They wear out the weight of the truck going in and out. So the front ramps, as you'll see, headquarters on New Haven Avenue is new, concrete. There's still one with asphalt that we want to change. And the other stations, East Side Station, North Side Station particularly. The back lots on headquarters and the North Side Station need to be repaved. Other expenses, capital, which would be the next couple accounts up in the emergency management, would be the Siemens Lane building. We're looking at putting a new roof on that. And other items would be some of the AC units on the roofs as they're aging too. We did get an ambulance just recently, and a fire truck bid just went out, so we'll see a new fire engine in 300 days. But again, next year we'll probably put in for another ambulance and a fire truck, fire engine.
You?
Any more questions pertaining to Alderman Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is not a question, but a comment, recognition. I had the good fortune of being, well, actually not the good fortune. I was transported by Milford Fire Department medical transport a few weeks ago to the hospital, so it wasn't really good fortune. But I wanted to. I know that in the past few years we have moved over to this system, and I did want to cite to you, to the chiefs, how prompt, how professional, how thorough the paramedics that attended to me that night, just about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and how much I appreciate it. As it turned out, it wasn't anything serious, fortunately, but I was most impressed. I've never been in an ambulance before, so this was my first experience, but they were very attentive, and I felt I was in very good hands, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate what the entire department does, both in that and also in the paramedic unit. Thank you for that.
Well, thank you for that. Hopefully you're okay. It's good. Did they know who you were? No. And thank Dan for that. That's Dan's department.
Alderman Vitale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Good evening, chiefs, to one of you. Just help me understand the account under capital outlays 0190. Computer, $7,200. Are they new replacements, handheld, what?
So I know, I think we spoke about this last year. These are upgrades. I have a sheet from MIS from Gene and our man that comes in there, Art, with some of the computers that he inventories and says that they need to be updated from and Windows XP, I don't know, up to 7s or 8s. There are a couple that we identify. And also in here, like we mentioned last year, I believe some of the computers are different. We have the tablets, we have the iPads that we go out with, so the server, and I believe we spoke about the licensings also, so there's a whole host of the...
You know how many they represent? How many computers or handhelds do they represent?
The 7,200. I don't know offhand. I can get that for you.
No big deal. Just wondered if you knew it offhand, that's fine.
Modems and the air cards also. Do we have a final number on that?
Yeah, no, I believe we have to replace one of our main servers, which is around $5,000, and then the remaining number was for a couple of desktop computers we haven't replaced yet, workstations.
Right. I can get that list from MIS.
So, right, I just, thank you for your service, guys. It's a great department.
Any more questions for the fire department? I'll give them a couple of seconds to digest. All right, then we'll move under the next department, which would be the lights, hydrants, and water, page 62, department number 4360.
So again, I kiddingly say every year these are just to pay the bills, and basically they are, and I believe it stayed flat. Water might have gone up a little bit, Peter. I think we went up a little bit in the water, but page 62. It's just paying the bills.
Gurman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you to one of the chiefs or the mayor, I don't know. So street lighting, so we anticipate switching over to LEDs this year or soon, very soon, throughout the city. And that number is staying the same. Should that be reduced by half at least? Question mark?
At this point, we know that the water amount for the hydrants is underfunded. It's underfunded every year. We are hopeful that the streetlight account is going to be in the black. We don't know yet because we have not gone through a full year cycle, but they are converting as we speak right now. They are going neighborhood by neighborhood. Steve Johnson is actually helping to supervise that process.
Alderman Vitale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Can you tell me how many how many hydrants do we have in the city?
I remember going over, the last count was 1,415. I believe we added a few since then.
How many we have added with new developments and all of that stuff? Any idea?
Not off the top of my head, but
Thank you. Just we have a lot of hydrants.
Under 1,500 at this point. There are a lot of new projects that are being built right now that we anticipate some hydrants in.
Thank you.
Alderman Ginatazio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. Good evening. Chief Ito, on the subject of hydrants, are they periodically inspected by the fire department to make sure that they're working properly?
Not from the fire department. Part of the plan that we have is that the water company would maintain the fire hydrants, which they do, and they test them almost twice a year for the most part. And particularly in the winter, they'll go around and check them and make sure that they're draining properly because they'll freeze. if the water stayed in them. But anytime we use a fire hydrant through the winter, the water company responds and vacuums out the hydrant, make sure all the water's out. It's all part of the plan that we have with the Regional Water Authority.
Has there ever been a situation where there was an emergency, a fire that you responded to and the hydrant wasn't working?
Yes, we've had frozen ones. Some where the stems are broken, and we actually wouldn't know that until we opened it. There have been some areas, and I know if you remember the Milford manufacturing fire that was on Erna Avenue. Well, the system wasn't installed correctly at the time, I would say, so they went in, the water company, and redid all the lines and actually looped the system. It was a dead-end system, basically, where the water came in from the post road and just stopped at a couple hydrants. Wasn't enough water to flow to put that fire out. Typically what you want it looped. And they came in since then and looped it because of all the other industries that are in that area. And additionally, in our plans now, where the Plains Road, Boston Post Road areas going, at the hotel and the, what else is going there, shopping, supermarket, I don't know which one, but it's private, but the water that's coming in it originally was just coming off the post road, and we said, well, that's not going to be enough flow. You need to connect it and have that loop because of an avenue. So they're now going to put pipe in from Plains Road and the post road, so it's going to loop that whole system. We'll have enough water for any incidents in that area.
Thank you.
Any more questions regarding lights, hydrants, and water? I see none, so we'll open up the other account on the fire department is 4331, emergency management, page 58.
This emergency management, that stayed flat this year. Last couple of years, it stayed flat. Emergency management work and the Siemens Lane building.
Anyone have any questions pertaining to emergency management? Seeing none, the last department under fire department would be Department 4805, CMed, page 88.
If there are any questions, I'll let Dan speak on that. If there are any questions, let's stay. Hold on.
Does anyone have any questions pertaining to CMed?
I'll just, Mr. Chairman.
Alderman Anderson.
I'll just beg the question for those on the board that may not know about CMed, if you can just briefly explain the service. Thank you.
Sure. It's kind of an obscure concept anyway. So CMed is a regional communications network, radio towers and radio stations and channels to network all of the emergency medical services assets in the area and network them in with the hospitals so that we can communicate back and forth with patient destinations and conditions. It also allows us the ability to incorporate mutual aid. So if we have peak call volume where we have more than the 4 emergency medical calls going on at one time that we have ambulances for, CMed does the outreach to find the next closest ambulances to respond into the region. So we can always account for that swell in service that we get. It happens quite often. And then the other thing would be any sort of large-scale event or God forbid, a mass casualty event or something like that where we needed more resources than we could muster. CMed would be the organization that would take care of that for us. Currently, we belong to Southwest CMed, which is in Bridgeport. We had moved from South Central CMed, which is in New Haven, which there are some issues, but we realized a tremendous savings in the Southwest CMed, and we actually get a better service out of them.
I recall the transition that occurred. Many towns made the similar move as Milford did. How many communities are now in this consortium?
Oh. Off the top of my head, I couldn't give you an exact answer. It's pretty much all of Fairfield County and us. So, you know, think of anything down to Stamford, Norwalk, Westport, Fairfield, Weston, Easton, those types of towns, in that little leg of Connecticut that sticks out.
And it's really terrific that in lieu of the services provided to our municipality, our residents, that we can do so at an affordable level as well.
Yeah.
Keep the costs down. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Any more questions pertaining to CMed? Alderman Giannattasio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. Just curious, what other issues did you have with New Haven other than that it was more costly?
New Haven's whole system was set up completely different, and they charged the communities differently as well. They charged the communities based on call volume and on population. So everybody got charged this formulaic way, but not everybody was getting the same services. For example, in the Valley has a paramedic service that doesn't have their own dispatch center, so they were dispatching for all the Valley towns, but the Valley towns were still paying that same formula that we were paying. You know, we were paying CMed for hospital networking and communications and for mutual aid, basically flat fee, whereas other towns and other services as well, like American Medical Response is a large ambulance company, probably the biggest user of the whole system. They don't pay into it at all. So I think it's still the case in Southwest CMed, but because it's such a flatter fee and the rates are based on a more realistic formula, I think that's why it's more acceptable down there. And then some of the other reasons was when they dissolved the New Haven CMed or the South Central CMed, AMR basically took over that whole function of the hospital networking, and due to a lack of oversight, I would say, because they're the biggest ambulance company in the area, I think a lot of people didn't want to really get into that sort of situation.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions pertaining to CMed? I don't see any. I want to thank Chief Ito, Chief Baker, and Chief Wasmer for
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
coming tonight and doing a good job answering all our questions. And thank you for all the great job you do for the city residents of Milford.
Thank you.
Have a good night. The next account this evening will be the account number 4818, Historic District Commission, page 90. I don't see anybody here. Mr. Mayor, questions?
No, if you have questions about the secretarial fees, happy to answer those.
Any questions for the Historic District Commission? I don't see any. I'll move on to next account, which is account number 4820, Historic District 2, page 91. Once again, anybody having any questions pertaining to Historic District 2? I don't see any. We'll move on to the next account, which is account number 4503, Public Debt Service, page 78. Anyone having any questions for the Public Debt Service account? I don't see any, so we'll move on to the next account, account number 4503. I'm sorry, the 4710, Employee Benefits, page 84. Anyone having any questions for Employee Benefits account? Alderman Gurman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to, I guess, the mayor or Mr. Ardici. The pension contribution, so last year was 5.9 million. This year is 6.8. Can you just expand on that a little bit and what the actuarial figures are and how they come up with all that?
Mr. Chairman, through you, each and every year we do have our actuaries run the numbers. It used to be an ARC, annual required contributions. GASB changed it to an ADEX, which I forget what it's an acronym for, but it's essentially the same thing. And we have had a policy that has been in place for many years. This board has adopted it, that we contribute the ARC unless it is more than last year's contributions or the previous year's contributions plus 15%. We have done a couple of things over the course of the last recent years to drive down the liabilities of our pension. We renegotiated with some of our collective bargaining units the long-standing contributions. Your board has probably done the most significant portion with both our fire and police. Several things to drive down our long-term liabilities with those, especially for new hires, in terms of what the total amount of pensions are eligible for those employees. Right now, we still have one of the most healthy pension funds in the state of Connecticut. It's one of the reasons why we have a AAA bond rating. That's one of the things that our rating agencies look at and take into consideration when they're evaluating the financial health of towns and cities.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any more questions regarding employee benefits? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next account, account number 4710. I'm sorry, account number 4720, insurance and bonds. Anyone having any questions pertaining to insurance and bonds account? Seeing none, we'll open under account number 4740, claims and refunds, page 85. Anyone having any questions pertaining to claims and refunds? I don't see any, so we'll open on to the next account, which is account number 4790, benefits and salary reserve, page 86. Anyone having any questions pertaining to benefits and salary reserve? Alderman Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at the footnote here, and I was going to ask our finance director or the mayor on this, just so I understand this, because it's come up before, and I perhaps have forgotten what the explanation was. Benefits and salary reserve represents estimates of these amounts when union contracts or non-represented salary ordinance have not yet been finalized. Can you, Peter, just explain a practical example of that? Have we just recently witnessed that prior to the ratification of one of the contracts?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, Alderman Smith, a recent example of that, which pertains to actually this recommended budget. For example, the nurses union and I believe fire dispatchers union, those two contracts are currently still in negotiations. So we normally or traditionally have left the regular wages unadjusted because the contracts have not been settled, and we put in an amount in this separate line item in anticipation of the wage increases once the contracts are settled.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any more questions pertaining to benefit and salary reserve? Seeing none, We'll open under the next account, which is account number 4992, private school textbook, page 93. Does anyone have any questions pertaining to private school textbook? Alderman Vitale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you, to the mayor. This account has stayed stagnant for the last 10 years, even though we have less private schools. So how is this number determined?
It is the amount that we have expensed over the course of at least the last decade, even though the cost of textbooks have arguably increased. We have kept it at this level because there has been a reduction. St. Gabe's is no longer active. The argument is that the Milford students may have shifted over to St. Mary's or another local private school that received these funds. So we have kept it at the same because, again, whereas there may be fewer students, the cost of textbooks has balanced that out.
That is very true, but in today's curriculum, textbooks are the actual hardcover books are being used less and less, and so how, I think that number could be adjusted, but we'll deal with that later. Thank you.
Any more questions pertaining to private school textbook? Seeing none, we'll open under the next account, which is account number 4799, unallocated contingency, page 86. Does anyone have any questions pertaining to unallocated contingency? I don't see any. So we'll open under the next account, which is account number 4993, education audit fees, page 93. Anybody have any questions pertaining to education audit fees? I don't see any. So we'll open under the next account, which is account number 4994, school debt, page 93. Anyone having any questions pertaining to school debt department? I don't see any. So we'll open under the next account, which is account number 4994, employee benefits dash non-teaching, page 93. Anyone having any questions pertaining to employee benefits non-teaching? I don't see any. We're open under the last account for this evening, account number 4997, education, health insurance contribution, page 94. Does anyone have any questions pertaining to education, health insurance contribution? Alderman Gurman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to, I guess, the mayor. So again, we're negotiated a more favorable health insurance contract. Will that number be adjusted, or how is that going to work between this Board of Education and the city side as well?
There will be some savings in years to come. Peter will have recommendations for technical corrections before or at the budget vote. I can give them to you in anticipation for the healthcare numbers. But again, it is a tight year for the health insurance, and I I know that our actuaries are still running the numbers about how it will impact the budget, but I can provide those to you if there's adjustments.
Thank you.
Any more questions pertaining to education-health insurance contribution? Alderman Tranquilli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Peter. This is more of a general question. Can you explain to me what a BR1 form is and why the Board of Aldermen don't get a copy of that form during the budget process?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the Alderman, the BR form, it's short for Budget Request Number 1. Those forms give a brief or a description or justification for each expense line item. I believe the BR2 forms are for the capital outlay items, and then, of course, BR3s if a department is requesting a new position or change in position to their budget request. Traditionally, it's many pages, of course, especially the BR1s. We make copies for the mayor, of course, the assistant mayor, myself, my office, but we're always happy to share them with you whenever needed.
Thank you.
Alderman Vitale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Peter. Peter, you just said the BR2 or the B2 form is for capital outlay. Can you define what you mean by capital outlay?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, capital outlay is usually items that are part of capital outlay through account classifications such as computers, construction costs, things that are in the 4,900 account series. So if you look in that family of accounts, you would see the different types of line items. We have a threshold of anything above $500 has to be charged to a capital outlay account. In the CAFR, or the city's annual financial report, the GASB threshold is $5,000. So capital outlay above $5,000 is depreciated except for land, and that's found in the CAFR. So like, if you look at all the 4,900 accounts, that gives you an idea of what we consider capital outlay.
Capital outlay defined by capital outlay, can you put it in other words? What does capital outlay encompass?
It's usually, in general, equipment, hardware, it could be software, things that are durable and that have useful lives, that last for a longer period of time than disposable items like a stapler or office supplies, for example.
Okay, so a piece of capital outlay cannot be found in any other portion of the budget but capital outlay. I always thought, and obviously I'm wrong, your definition, that capital outlay was something new to the department, never having it before, and something that was not consumable, number one, or renewable.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the Alderman, we don't necessarily look at it strictly for something that's new, like a new request, but you know, obviously these purchases, they are new by definition when you buy something, unless you buy something used. But they are, like I said, items with useful lives that are longer than I forget what the threshold is, whether it's 5 years or more, but there are different classifications based on automobiles, buildings, different types of equipment, different classifications with useful lives. So we look at it strictly from an account classification point of view.
Thank you. Again, it's not something new because you never had it. You're just buying it again or buying it, but I just thought it was equipment, almost like a wish list that, you know, this is capital outlay, that there's something new that the department never had before. And so I guess I was mistaken. Thank you.
Anyone else have any more questions pertaining to education, health insurance contribution? Seeing none, I'm going to entertain a motion to recess to the next budget meeting, which will be Wednesday, May 9th, next Wednesday night. Is there a motion? Motion is made and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? I just want to make another notation. I put on your calendar, Tuesday, May 22nd is put aside. Make a note on your calendar, Tuesday, May 22nd would be our budget voting night, Tuesday, May 22nd. But our next budget meeting is be May 9th, Wednesday night, next Wednesday night. Thank you. We are in recess.